Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Let's Code Along. So in this episode, we are going to fix our problem from the last episode, and we are also going to look at how to do user logins with Firebase. So what we're going to do is we are going to first fix our problem. Now, the problem was that when we were updating a note, this was getting updated and then it just wasn't coming into here. And I took a second to think about it, and it's because of this portion here. I think when I was just kind of building this out with you, I was thinking we were going to do something else with the note inside of this component, but in fact, we don't need it at all because all we do is we update it and then it's gone. So let's remove that, and basically anywhere where it says this.state.note, let's put props there. So this.props.note, props, because basically every time as the note gets updated, it's going to get refreshed from the Firebase database and then it's going to be passed down as props. So we should just be adding it and interacting with it as props. So I think that's it. So if we save this, refresh our page, we still get all the notes, but more importantly, if I edit this, blah, 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 yes, it does what we want. And if I refresh the page, it also does what we want. Cool. So just a small little oopsie there, but figure that one out. So what we would like to do, however, is we'd like to have the ability so that users can log in and so that users can actually maybe save their own notes. Because right now, these are just kind of like general notes that anyone can actually access. So how can we make it that users can log in and have their own notes and stuff like that? So if we go to the Firebase console, and if we go to authentication, what we can do is we can turn on a different provider, a different way to have users log in. So right now there is no way set up, so we have to set up our own method. And what we're going to do is we're just going to use the email and password for now, but there's a ton of other ones out here, GitHub, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So pretty cool stuff. And there's also like an auth, so you can have these redirects and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick email. I'm going to click enable, and we'll hit save. And that's it. It's done. So now when we add users, they'll actually show up here. And the really cool thing is, I think this might still be in beta, but when you actually log in and sign up, you actually get emails. So you can actually send up email templates for when a user needs to verify, if they need to verify, reset, or if they need to change something. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how this works. So if we click on overview here, there is a place where we can actually look at the docs for Firebase, right? If I click on Firebase, yeah, API reference. So on the reference page here, there's actually a couple different places. So if we were doing an Android app, there's an Android package, iOS package, C++ package, but we're doing the web package. And if we look here, there's all these different ways, all these different methods. Now, there is actually, if we go back here, we can actually see, I think there's a nicer kind of documentation on like how to do authentication. No, this is not it. Guides, it's in the guides section, sorry. So you go guides, authentication, web, and I think it's just password authentication would be the one we're looking at. Yeah. I love these method names in Firebase because it's stuff like create user with email and password. It tells you exactly what it is you want, and then that's it. So that is what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to use. So we're going to use the create user with email and password, and we're also going to use the sign in user with email and password. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of change the let me bring up our database here. Change the structure of our database a bit so that it's not just all of these notes that are here. So everyone, maybe it's going to be structured, tiered a bit more. So it's like only somebody who their specific ID, their notes that we want to access. So let's get started. So first thing we need to do is if we go over to the app.js file, we need to add some more stuff to our navigation. And what we need to add is we need to add a user create account, right? Create account, because they might not have an account available or they might not have an account already, right? So we're going to do that, and we're going to say on click, we want to do something. Now, I'm going to pull from an older thing that I have, but we want to actually make a little modal box pop up and a little overlay. So first I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy some code here. So I'm going to add this div that has the class of overlay. That ties into some CSS that just puts a big overlay positioned, I think, fixed or absolute on top of everything. And I'm also going to pull in this, and then I'll walk through the HTML in a second. But just underneath the aside here, I'm going to pull in this here. So just so I don't spend too much time sitting here basically writing a whole bunch of stuff with you. Actually, I don't think we need this because we're going to do this different. Well, you know what? We'll fix that in a second. But basically, we have a div that's going to be our create user modal, and we have a reference to it. It has a close button, and then it has this form, and the form is pretty straightforward. It has an email, it has a password, and it has a confirm password. So we want to make sure, we want to check before we actually send it that those are the same. And then we have a submit button. I said that we're going to change this because we actually won't, we're doing it sort of the different way now. When I was playing around with this earlier, I was kind of going off that way. So we're just going to change this to look something, well, actually, just like that. Yeah, so on submit, this is going to happen. So let's scroll on up here. Maybe under our remove note, we'll have this create user method. So it's going to get the event. It's going to get the form event. So we'll want to prevent that from happening. And if we refresh the page here real quick, oh, did my gulp? Of course, my gulp crashed. Or not crashed, but gave me an error. Unfortunately, because I have two screens, it should show up over here, but it shows up on the other screen. So I'm not really paying attention to it. So 71. We can't just put an empty expression like that. It needs something in there. So we'll worry about that in a second. Cool. Okay, so we have this create account button that isn't really hooked up properly because the way that we made it work is we have, we don't have anything, but what that should do is that should toggle and it should show our overlay and it should show our form here. So I think in the CSS, for both of these, I just have a show. Yeah, show class for those. So let's actually, I'm going to close this notes card because I don't think we need that anymore. I'm going to close this gulp file and we don't need the index.html. So what we're going to do is let's make an event called show login. No, show create. And show create, maybe we'll put it above create, show create. What it'll do is it will, it needs to prevent the default, that's for sure. Prevent default. And what it will do is it will toggle the show class on those two things. So this dot overlay dot class list dot toggle. So we want to toggle the show. And we also want to toggle this dot, is there a reference on that form? Yeah, create modal, create user modal. I'm just gonna grab that. So this dot create user modal, dot class list dot toggle show as well. Cool, I think that'll work. Now we do have to bind it up here so that we get it to what we want. This dot show create, I think it is. Yeah, equals this dot show create dot bind this. A little frustrating that you have to keep doing that, but not a big deal. So I think we're good. Let's see what happens. So refresh, get out of here, click, perfect. Oh, I guess the overlay is not on top of these other things. Z index of like 10. Then it's too high over the modal. Okay. Hold on. We'll fix this CSS real quick. So our modal and overlay, let's just give them both a Z index of 10, just so they're like a little above everything. And I think that should still be good because if they're both the same amount, yes. And this one's above it. Perfect. Cool. So what we need to do is we need to have the ability to grab the user's email and password, and then when they hit create, we need to actually go and create that user. So what we want to do is we want to, in here, when the user hits submit, grab this information and check it real quick. So on submit, we need to check the passwords match. And actually, we do have to make sure that they are at least 6 characters, because I believe, if we check here, that they have to be at least 6 characters. Or like it can't be like a weak password. Let's see, auth reference. Well, yeah, so it has this, it'll throw if it's a weak password, but I forget what specifically makes it a strong. We'll figure it out. I mean, for my use cases, I just use password when I'm doing these little demos. So let's do that. So check if passwords match. If so, we want to create a user. So first things first, let's grab the password. So, well, I guess password will equal this dot. What is the reference to that? Create password and confirm password. So this dot create password dot value, and then const confirm will make equal to this dot confirm password dot value. So now we have these 2 passwords, and it's going to be a simple check of really if password is equal to confirm. So if they are equal, we'll be good. Else, I didn't actually add in any special errors, so we'll just put like an alert like passwords must match. Cool. But if they are, then we'll be able to go ahead and do something. Let's actually see and make sure that that works just like that. So I click create user, blah, blah, blah. We'll just do like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have an error. Cannot read property create password of null. Cannot create property. This, is this? Oh, you know what? We didn't bind our this up here. So this dot create user equals this dot create user dot bind this. So refresh, click, I mean, completely incorrect passwords. Perfect. Passwords must match. Okay. And obviously, you could go ahead and style a nice modal or something like that for that to show if you wanted to. But let's actually go ahead and do the creating of the user now. So we check to see if everything is correct, and then we want to go ahead and create that user. So we use Firebase, and instead of database, we're going to use .auth. So we're using the auth method here, and I'm just going to put an enter here. Create user with email and password. Looks right. So what we need to do is we need to put the user and password in there. So we already have the password, and you know what? Let's just go ahead and let's store the email as well up here. This dot, what is it? What is the reference? Create password is the reference. Create email dot value. Now the dot value is actually really important, because if you try to pass this just like this dot create email along, what's going to end up happening is you're sending the whole you're trying to send the whole element to the thing, and that's just not going to work for you. So we need to send in, and actually let's double check the order here. So it goes email and then password. So we'll go email and we'll go password. So that's because we set up these 2 variables up here that represent those. And then this actually returns a promise. So we can actually do 2 things. We can do a .then and a .catch. So we can catch if there's any errors. So again, if you had a nicer way of referencing the error, you could, or like a modal window, you could do that. But I know we'll just use an alert here, and I know that this error object has a message. So it's error.message if we want to send that. But more importantly, if it comes back and it's resolved successfully, we want to go ahead and do something. And in this case, I think what we want to go ahead and do is we want to basically toggle that create menu again, right? So I guess we can just go ahead and do this dot show create. I guess we'll just do our little trick where we pass that event along. I'm sure there's a nicer way to do that, but it seems to work. And I don't think there's any penalties for calling this dot or e.prevent default more than once for the same event. If there is, let me know and we can change that. Okay, so let's try this. Refresh. And actually, really important is what we should do is open up this console here. So we have the authentication, the users here. This is the email and password, so there's no users yet. Let's create our first user. So I'm going to make it really simple. Mine's going to be Ryan at Ryan Christiani, and it's going to be a really simple password that I remember. And I hit create, and then it gives me an error. That is not a function. Create user with email and password. Did I spell it wrong? I bet I spelled it wrong. Create user with email and password. Create user with email and password. I'm just going to copy it. Oh, I can see it. Oh, no L in email. I love those typos because I'm sure you could have seen it a long time ago, but I can't. I can't see it. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So it was created. Now, how do we know it's created? If we go to the console, we should be able to see here, refresh, we can see our user. I don't think the users get automatically updated like the other ones, but if we go into our console, so I'm not sure what this is. Oh, maybe because we called that again. Well, I'm not too concerned about that right now. Let's worry about that a little bit later. But if you go firebase.auth here, .current user, you can see that it actually returns this object that represents our current user. So if there is a current user, this is it here. If there isn't, you don't see this information. So now we have the ability to actually kind of like change and switch whether or not the user is active or not. And that actually allows us to go back to our database and let's change the rules again. So let's change these rules back. So does it give us the ability to just write? I think we just have to do this again. So I think it was like auth is not equal to null. How can I just want to like go back to the way it was before. I forget the way the rules work necessarily. Oh, but I think I have, yeah, I just stored it real quick over here. So I go boop. Yeah, I was on the right path. Okay, so let's publish that. So basically you have to be authenticated. These are the default. There should be a nice like go back to the default button over here. So if I refresh this page, I'm actually logged in, so this is technically fine, but check this out. So we sign out. I think it's sign out like that. And then I refresh the page, and now it's not going to let me get that information because I'm not signed in. So we need to be able to be signed in to see our notes. That gives us this new problem. We can create a user, but we can't log in as a user. So let's go ahead and let's add another navigation here. And then we'll get into conditionally showing the ones we want at what times. But let's add another navigation here, and we'll call it login. So if you are already logged, if you already have an account, we want you to log in. So let me just show login. So I'm also going to, again, grab some HTML I had from earlier, just so I don't bore you with that. And it's actually a little bit smaller. So I'm going to copy this. Here's the create user modal. I'm just going to put it above, and I'm just put some spaces here so we can see the differences. So this is the login modal. Same thing, sort of. Login modal, reference to it. Oh, I didn't finish whatever I was doing there, so we'll fix that in a second, and all that stuff. And actually, the close button for the other one doesn't work as well, but we'll figure that out. So we have the submit, and we'll change this because we're going to make it the way that we have been doing it now. And that's it. So simple form, 2 inputs, and a submit button. Now, if we go on up here, we do need to create a new method called login user. Actually, we'll show login first, and then login user. So show login. What show login is going to do is pretty much a very similar thing, but it's going to do this dot overlay dot class list dot toggle show, and then this dot what's it called, login modal dot class list dot toggle as well. So we're going to do that, and that will be able to show it. So let's try that. Let's make sure that works first. So I click login. Cannot read property overlay of undefined. Of course, we haven't, you guessed it, bound our this. So this dot show login equals this dot show login dot bind. Not bind, bind this. Cool. Okay, so let's try this now. Save that. Refresh, click login. Okay, great. So it gives us that ability. So now that that form is there, we need to, on submit of this form, log the user in. So let's try this. Login user. Again, we're going to get an event passed to it, e.prevent default. And just to mitigate this problem early on, let's bind that right away. Login user equals this dot login user dot bind this. Wow. I have to say, making these videos has made me a little bit of a better typer because I pay attention to the screen more and where I'm speaking, as opposed to just like putting my head down and looking at the keyboard. But I still mess up quite a bit. Okay, so when we get this, we want to grab the email from the user and the password that they entered. So this is going to equal this dot, I think it's login email. Yeah, user email, user password. User email dot value, and password is this dot user password dot value as well. And so if this is all correct, what we should be able to do is we should be able to do Firebase dot auth, and then this one is called sign up. I'm just going to copy this. I think we can see where this is going. Sign up with email and password, where we pass in the email, we pass in the password. We can catch if there is an error. So if there is some sort of error, we can say alert error.message. And I'm not going to do a dot then on this one because, actually, I think I do want to do a dot then on this one because we do want to not show the modal anymore, right? So again, oops, what am I doing here? We'll just do a this dot show login and be sneaky and pass that down. We'll see if that's actually causing a big error, and then we can figure out a way to solve that in our last video, the finishing touches video. But let's keep moving so that we can get going here, because this one video is coming on a little long. So we don't have to create a user, and maybe we'll actually get rid of this button real soon here, but we do need to log in a user. So I'm going to try again, Ryan. I'll go and I hit submit, and it works just fine. That's great. So you can see here it auto completes and stuff like that, and it's logged us in. Now, how do I know it's logged us in? Well, when I refresh, it shows all that stuff there. But if I again go Firebase auth.current user and I hit enter, we can see that right here that there is a user, in fact. Cool. So that is good. That is great. Let's fix those two close buttons, and then I think in the last video we'll work on changing the database structure so that the notes represent only those current users, and then we'll call it a day. So these two closes don't really do anything, do they? So I think what we need to do is we need to on-click for both of these. Well, let's do the login first. So on-click, I think we can just call... I think we can just call it a show login and show create, right? Because those will have events, and that won't really cause any problems with our situation there. So let's try this here. Click. Nice. Nice. Perfect. Great. Awesome. Cool. So that's that. Is there anything else we should do before we move on? I don't think so. So I think the last little bit that we'll be doing is we will be changing up the database structure slightly so that here we go, the data, so that it's not just like putting all the information here. Maybe it'll kind of tier the information a bit. And then maybe we'll talk about some next steps of things you could do. We don't actually do them, and then we'll wrap it up from there. So hope to see you in the next video. Yep, see you in a bit.